Is it ever possible to make our karma as a zero?
Unlikely, because karma is so vast. But
How do we take responsibility of our karma? What will happen to me after my death?
to want to stay here and want to come back again and again and again to bring the light of enlightened awareness into the world. I'd be happy to take any questions if people have them.
So Ms. Ananti is here with me.
Thank you, sir. It was a pleasure to hear to you. And I have a query. So is it ever possible to make our karma as a zero?
To make karma zero?
Yes, sir.
Probably not. I'm saying probably because I can't tell you with absolute authority that no. But in my observation would tell me that it would seem to be very unlikely because karma is so vast. But if our intention, if your intention or my intention, if our intention is to take responsibility, I'm saying we have to cultivate a superhuman spiritual aspiration. So we have to cultivate a superhuman spiritual aspiration. Like, for example, the Buddha, on the night of his enlightenment, when he sat under the Bodhi tree, he said, "I'm not going to get up until I'm enlightened." So that would be an example of a superhuman aspiration. So, in relationship to the incalculable amounts of karma that we all have, all of which includes the past karma, the prarabdha karma, the karma we've created in this life, and the karma we've yet to create in future lives. If we have a very focused and conscious aspiration, a superhuman aspiration, to take responsibility for all of it. If we actually intend to, we have to think like a Superman or a Superwoman. That our heart has to connect with a superhuman love for spirit. That my belief is that if we intend with all of our hearts to take responsibility for absolutely all of it, and stop leaning on anybody for any reason, then I think magical and profound things can happen. But it's my belief that if no karma were to exist, I think the body would disappear. We would cease to exist in the universe. And remember that the universe wants to exist. If the universe didn't want to exist, the universe wouldn't exist. So we have to realize that we could almost say that the fact that the universe exists, you could say, is the karma of Brahman himself. So this is incalculable amounts of karma that are just unimaginable for a human being. So, but if we want to win liberation, if we want to win our own liberation, I firmly believe that if we cultivate the conscious intention and the sincere intention, the sincere awakened intention to take responsibility for karma past, present, and future in the present moment. So it means that it kind of means I aspire to take responsibility for eternity, the eternity of karmas in the present moment. That's like it's an infinite embrace. It's an infinite superhuman embrace of karma in all directions, past, present, and future in the present moment. If we can do this, there's no doubt the profound and important life-changing miracles can and will happen through that superhuman intention.
Okay, sir.
But I think the idea of karma not existing anymore is almost too profound a thought, because as I was saying to you earlier, the universe exists because the universe wants to exist. And if Brahman exists, the universe exists because he wants the universe to exist. And that desire of the universe existing in and of itself brings with it an incalculable degree of karma, no?
Yes, sir.
So I can't imagine the idea of karma not existing, but I can imagine, and this is something that I work with myself, cultivating the wholehearted willingness of the level of the soul to take responsibility for all karma, past, present, and future, which is, we speak very frankly and honestly, impossible. But if we cultivate a superhuman aspiration, then we're reaching for that which is impossible. And our willingness to reach for that which is impossible with utter sincerity creates openings in the inner cosmos that make miracles happen. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, sir. So I have another question in continuing. So in case I'm already in this path, I'm trying to achieve moksha, and say that I achieve moksha, what will happen to me after my death?
Well, I want to ask you a question. If you were God and you created the universe, what's your name?
Ananti.
And you realized that Ananti had realized moksha, that her heart had become so pure and her mind had become so clear that she'd become a messenger to all humanity about consciousness. And because she'd achieved moksha, she had spontaneously begun to speak about the potential for moksha in all of humanity, and she was gathering around her crowds and multitudes of people who simply sitting near her, being in her presence, were feeling their minds were relieved of tension and their hearts were opening and they were becoming attracted to the Dharma. They wanted to learn, they wanted to meditate, and just being near her, they were sent into states of samadhi. Now, if you were God and you saw that her body had passed, would you want her to come back to earth to continue the good work that she was doing, or would you want her to continue on disembodied in some Brahmaloka? Would she be of more value to you if she was willing to take a human birth and come back and continue the extraordinary work that she had started here on planet Earth, or would she be better suited to find and rest in Brahmaloka for eternity? I think if I was God, I would think, well, it's taken hundreds of thousands of years for me to work with this soul to get them to the point where they achieve moksha. So now that finally she's doing some good for me, she's no longer living for herself, and she's no longer living to satisfy the desires of her ego, but she's become a liberated jiva. Now I need to keep her in my employment. I need to keep her working with me. So I'm going to ask her to take rebirth, so she can become a minister of consciousness, so she can become a transmitter of the light of enlightened awareness in this world of darkness and confusion.
Yes, sir, I would probably do that.
And that's what I think Brahman wants from all of us. I don't think Brahman wants us to disappear in Brahmaloka. I think he wants us to awaken here on earth. And once we've awakened, to want to stay here and want to come back again and again and again to bring the light of enlightened awareness into the world.
So thus our karma will never become zero.
Well, I think if we realize that karma and creation are part of one process, then the only way that all the karma would disappear is if the universe would disappear. As long as the universe exists, an unquantifiable amount of karma exists along with it. And as I said, the most fascinating and compelling aspect of that is that there is the karma of Brahman himself, who obviously chose to create the universe. Brahman chose to create the universe, and in that choice, there's obviously an enormous amount of karma. But you can say, well, how could God have a karma? But the creation of the universe brings with it so many effects. The cause of the universe brings with it countless effects. And that's the very definition of what karma is. So I remember when someone asked the Buddha about how to understand karma, he said, don't try because it's so complex, you'll go mad. So I think that when I start to think about the magnitude of what karma actually is, it expands my consciousness. And then what I try and do is I try and cultivate in myself, as we were speaking about, a desire to take responsibility for all of my own karma, past, present, and future. I try and cultivate a superhuman aspiration. And as I said, when we cultivate a superhuman aspiration, we know that we're going to fail. But if we try with all our heart, if we reach for a superhuman aspiration, we open up portals to the possible because we're reaching that far. To reaching that far, we create the room for miracles to actually happen, and they do. And they really, really do. But we have to think so big. We have to think with an enormous. Our heart has to grow very big than when we think this way. It has to become so. We have to reach into the future with an infinite aspiration, way, way beyond what our mortal body could even begin to contain.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ananti ma'am. So we have a person named GC.
Hi, Namaste, Andrew. It was lovely listening to you.
Thank you.
My question is, how do we take responsibility of our karma, and how do we cultivate that conscious habit in our everyday lives?
So your question is, do you want to be a victim of your history?
No.
Or do you want to be a master of your destiny?
Master of my destiny, yes.
So if you no longer want to be a victim of your history and want to be a master of your destiny, because you no longer want to be a victim of your history and because you want to be a master of your destiny, that's where the energy and the inspiration comes from.
Yes.
To want to take responsibility for the karma, because you realize if you don't, and most people don't, if you don't want to take responsibility for your karma, you inevitably are going to be a victim of your history.
Right.
It's either one way or the other. There's no other possibility. So realizing that it's one way or the other,
right,
you have no choice but to take responsibility for your karma, because you want to be a master of your destiny, not a victim of your history. And because it's dawned on you, oh my goodness, unless I take responsibility for myself, I'm going to be a victim of my history, and I don't want to be, because you don't want to be. That's where you're going to find the energy and the inspiration to do whatever you need to do to take responsibility for all of your karma, so you can be liberated.
Thank you so much. And also, I want to know if karma that has not been taken responsibility, how does it multiply, or does it manifest in our life, and in which ways?
Well, karma is like a momentum. So, for example, if there's a wheel and you keep spinning the wheel, you have to spin the wheel, it starts moving of its own accord, no? And each time you spin it. So remember, karma are like cosmic habits. And they're habits that can come. They're habits that can be expressions of ignorance.
Yes.
And wrong thinking.
Yes.
So when we begin to wake up, when our heart begins to open, when our mind begins to become clear, we begin to see what we're doing. We begin to see ourselves spinning, and we say, "I have to stop doing that." Yes. We start to see all the ways in which we're making ourselves crazy, and in which we're creating negative impressions and negative karmas in the world. So when we wake up in this way, we change our behavior, we change our attitudes. Yes. So karma is the accumulated momentum of either positive or negative habits, and generally we're speaking about karma in the negative sense. So it's the accumulated momentum of positive or negative habits.
Yes.
And most of these accumulated negative habits are happening at an unconscious level.
Yes.
So if we're acting out at an unconscious level of negative habits all the time, we're creating this huge momentum in the wrong direction. And so that's why the urgency to wake up and to become aware of what's happening inside us and the choices that we're making, the actions we're taking, becomes a matter of life and death, spiritual life and death. Yes. So this is when we begin to take meditation very seriously, because we realize that our destiny depends upon waking up and taking responsibility for this karma and turning the ship around so we can become master of our destiny and not victims of our history.
Thank you. Okay.
And I don't know how much of my talk that you heard, but the first principle I talked about was cultivating the desire to be free more than anything else. So the first principle says, I want to be free more than anything else.
Yes.
And cultivating the aspiration to want to be liberated as an absolute priority is where we find the strength and the willingness to do whatever it is that we need to do to succeed. But it has to become a priority, not the fifth on the list, but the first on the list. I want to be free more than I love my little boy. Even.
Yes, could be possible.
Even. I love my little boy and I love my husband.
Yeah.
But I love the creator of the universe even more.
Okay.
It
That
takes
will be challenging, but I shall try.
yeah. Well, but then it works. It works then.
Yeah.
You don't have to abandon anybody. You just need to put the aspiration for moksha as a spiritual priority.
Yes.
And then in that you cultivate a kind of sovereignty or independence in relationship to your own soul, which will make you a very strong woman.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. Namaste.
Thank you.
Thank you, Juicy.
Thank you so much.
So, yes. So we have another person named Nagamani. She has posted a question in the chat. So she said, what does it mean by death of ego? Does the sense of body completely vanish?
No, it's the death of the ego. It's nothing to do with the body. The ego is the separate identity. It's the personal identity. The ego has connected to a story. So Shalini has a story related to her life in this planet. She was born to a particular family in a particular place, and she had such and such life experiences. And when somebody calls Shalini's name, she turns her head. And when she turns her head, this is related to that story. It's the personal identity related to the story of being Shalini. I also have a story related to my identity as Andrew. Andrew was born in New York in 1955, and he had particular life experiences. But the ego dies when Shalini realizes that who she really is. Shalini is the energy and intelligence that created the universe. That's creating the universe, awakening to itself and becoming conscious of itself through the body, mind, and personality of Shalini. So Shalini is not merely Shalini. Shalini is the creative energy and intelligence that created the whole universe. So this is her body, her mind, and her personality is merely a vehicle. So the ego is the personal identity that is yet to realize that it's really God. So when Shalini realizes, oh, I was never really Shalini, I was really Brahman, I was really the creator of the universe, I was the energy and intelligence that created the whole universe. And now I've realized that Shalini's body, mind, and personality is just a vehicle for that identity, that I was never really Shalini. So the ego dies when Shalini realizes that Shalini is merely a vehicle for consciousness. Shalini was never who Shalini was. Shalini was never who Shalini really was. Shalini was. So the death of the ego is death of the small identity, death of the small personality.
Yes, so I loved your answer. Yes.
Shalini is merely a vehicle.
Yes.
Her body, her mind, her personality is a vehicle.
Yes.
For consciousness itself. Shalini was never the point. So someone is lost in ego when they believe that I am Shalini. Say, no, you're not Shalini. Shalini is a vehicle for the energy and intelligence that created the universe. I was never merely Shalini. I'm the creator of the universe, awakened to itself through the body, mind, and personality of Shalini.
Absolutely.
So the ego dies when Shalini wakes up and realizes that. Andrew's ego dies when he wakes up and realizes that.
Thank you. Thanks for the beautiful answer.
Sure, thank you.
So we have Mr. Jagdish Ji with us. Sir, you can please ask your question.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mr. Cohen.
Hello, sir.
Mine is a slightly long-winded question. My age demands a lot more answer in that case. You see, first simple question is, how does one take responsibility for one's past karma when one doesn't know what one's past was? Secondly, given that we are only an part of a process, an entity in a process, and therefore we take probably a personality or a body, which means to say we could have been anything during this process. In your life, you could have probably been anything else other than a human being. And it vanishes along with the time that it serves its purpose at that moment. given that kind of a thing, and you say right now you take responsibility because we don't know what we were before. Secondly, see, in a systems philosophy that I've been dealing with for thing, now we can, when we say control destiny, there are about a few variables alone that we can control, and large amount infinite variables are outside there. See, I had a good life. I'm very comfortable and very grateful to that. Most of it, I think, is because things happen to me. There are certain things I control, which was under my control. The rest are things happen to me out of goodwill, out of blessings of others, of which I'm gratitude, etc. Under such circumstances, how do you want to actually take control of one's destiny when a lot more is outside one's realm of influence?
Well, I think the question is we can't control everything that's going to happen.
Yes.
We can't, but what we can learn to do is control our reaction or our relationship to what happens to us. So we can't control our destiny in terms of we can't control what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to happen, but we can learn how to control our reactions and our responses. We can learn how to do that. Now, in relationship to the first question that you asked, in order to understand this, one has to use one's spiritual imagination. So in our spiritual imagination, we want to try and grapple with what would it be like? What would it be like if I was to reach for eternity? So for the rational mind, reaching for eternity is an impossibility. But if we begin to conceive of, if we begin to kind of conceive of this reaching for eternity, we can start to feel that an opening begins to happen in the soul, where we find that at a metaphysical level, we begin to experience that we're reaching beyond the limitations and beyond the boundaries of our own self, into the infinite. We're reaching beyond the boundaries and limitations of our own self, towards and into the infinite itself. And we're using our awakened imagination to do it. But using the awakened imagination, it begins to open up metaphysical boundaries and metaphysical space. And when we can open up in that way, we begin to, at a certain point, we begin to cognize reality differently. We begin to experience a freedom from the narrow boundaries of time and space, and portals appear or feel like they're opening up in inner space that allows us to experience this eternity. And in that consciousness, in that state of awareness, we can aspire to take responsibility for the past and the present and the future, which is when I was speaking to Shaun, I was explaining that it's technically impossible to do that. But because we know that it's impossible doesn't mean we can't aspire to do that. And so when we aspire to do something that requires a superhuman aspiration, it's in the superhuman aspiration that we break the boundaries that begin to get broken. And so it's a realm beyond the known, where we begin to enter into the unknown. And we have to use the muscles, our rational muscles, the muscles of our rational thinking, to break through the limited boundaries of time and space and mind. And when we do that, we begin to feel this metaphysical space begins to open up within us, and we begin to feel a cognizance and a consciousness of eternal dimensions of being, the eternal dimensions of reality, which is the experience of a kind of inner freedom that's rationally impossible to describe.
Does it mean that we could experience within a rational boundary as what we were actually in the previous birth?
Well, I have never had that experience, sir. I have never had that experience, but there are people, including my own guru, who told me that he knew who he was in his past life. And he told me once, he told me a very fantastic story. Now, I don't know how true, I don't know what to say about it. I can only tell you what he told me, because I'm also a very rational person. But he said he was in a very deep meditation, and he said he realized that he was on another planet, and he saw these life forms that scared him because he'd never seen anything like them. They were these sentient beings that he couldn't relate to because they were so ugly, they were so horrible, because he'd never seen them. And then he went from one to the other, to the other, to the other, to the other, to the other. And then he was suddenly on another planet, and this process continued. And at a certain point, he realized that they were all him. And this process went on and on and on until he went from many planets, bearing witness to many of these different incarnational beings, until he came to planet Earth. And then this process continued on planet Earth from one lifetime to another, to another, to another, to his last life, to this life. And then his guru was Ramana Maharshi, and he said the movie stopped when he saw the face of his guru, and that was the end of the film. And he said to me, he said, I don't know what that was. He said he was explaining to me, this is a fantastic experience, a cosmic experience. Whether he was literally witnessing the evolution of his soul through these infinite incarnations on other planets leading up to planet Earth, or whether this was just a fantastic imagination awakened in the depth of his meditation, I don't know, sir.
Thank you.
I don't know. But I do believe, just before we finish, that we have a capacity to experience. I think we have the capacity in our consciousness to penetrate past, present, and future in ways in which we're not ordinarily aware of. But we can cultivate these capacities if we learn how to meditate very deeply. Specifically, if we learn how to transcend the limitations of the rational mind, which is not an easy thing to do. But when we learn how to penetrate the limitations of the rational mind, I do believe we can have glimpses beyond what the rational mind would even imagine would be possible. I believe that. I'm working on that myself. But the best thing to do, sir, is what I think we want to do is, I believe we need to be ferociously rational and questioning everything with a ferocious, rational mind. And at the same time, for there to be a deep openness and interest in what's possible. Then like to hold the balance between ferocious rationality and a very passionate openness and interest in what's possible.
Yeah.
Because when I met my guru, sir, I had experiences which I never thought would be possible. I literally felt things and saw things that my rational mind could not believe were actually true, but yet they were true. And so since then, there's been an openness in me that wasn't there before, and yet I'm still a ferociously rational person.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jagdishji. So, Andrew, just to sum up, a person has asked regarding this 5-star principle. As I could recollect and say it in your words, the first is cultivating the desire.
First is it's called clarity of intention, cultivating the intention to be free.
Okay. And second is...
the second is wanting to take responsibility for karma, past, present, and future.
Responsibility for karma.
So that's number 2.
And the third is willing to face
everything and avoid nothing.
Yes. And the fourth is rise to the universe.
Embrace a process perspective, to see everything as an impersonal process rather than a personal experience.
Yes. And the fifth is regarding the cosmic conscience.
Cosmic conscience, which means I exist not for my own sake, but I exist for the sake of the whole. I want to realize moksha not for my own sake, not for my own liberation, but for the evolution of the interior of the entire cosmos.
Yes. Thank you.
Sure.
So we have another question from the participant, Ratan Goyal. So they have posted, what does I want to be free means?
It means I want to experience what the Buddha experienced on the night of his enlightenment. And it's true. No, but just wait. But we should all think about this, because I in my own life, and I mean it very seriously, I've been very bold. So I wanted to know, what was the Buddha's experience? I want to know what his experience was. What was the experience of Ramana Maharshi? I want to know what his experience was. What was the experience of Paramahansa Yogananda? I want to know for myself, what was this experience? So freedom means jumping out of an airplane without a parachute. If you jump out of an airplane without a parachute, it means you have no intention of coming back, ever. So on the Buddha, on the night of his enlightenment, when he said, "I'm not going to get up until I'm enlightenment," I'm jumping out of an airplane without a parachute, and I had no intention of coming back.
Yes. So, Ananthi ma'am, we can just proceed with the rest of the other question.
Yes, Shalini, thank you. We have a query from Mr. Shivar, sir. He asks, does the karma done by the ancestor affect the future generation?
Yes, and yes, indeed. Of course, the karma is both individual and collective. So we're all subject to, we have our personal karmas and our cultural karmas. They all affect us. They're all moving forward in time. So we're all subject to the karmic momentum of our ancestors. Absolutely, that's part of the sum totality of our personal karmas. Involved the karmas of our ancestors. And that's true for all human beings. We're all carrying the sum total of the past within us.
Okay.
Nobody's born with a clean slate. We have our own prarabdha karma from our past lives, but we also have if we want to take it that much more seriously, if we look at how evolution works, each and every human being has the imprint of all the forms of life that have existed since the original single-celled amoebas existed when life first emerged. So within our bodies, we have the entirety of evolutionary history is vibrating within us, and all of that karma on a certain level is we're all carrying all of it, which is unthinkable. It's unimaginable. But we're all carrying the sum total of all the entire creative process within our very cells, within our souls, and it's spiritually and psychologically inconceivable. But when our meditation, we have to open up so much. We have to allow our minds to get so big that we can begin to embrace all this and let it in, because we are the whole universe, and we are all of life, and all of that karma and all that history. And all of its momentum lives within each and every one of us. Absolutely.
Okay, that makes it very clear, sir.
Yeah, it's overwhelming.
Yes, we have another query, sir. It's kind of interesting, so I'll just ask you: if the universe is calling for all humans to rise above and attain moksha, in a hypothetical scenario where all humans are eventually and all living beings achieve moksha, that is every human being, sir. And then what will be the purpose of the remaining universe minus the living things?
Well, I think that my guess is that this is my belief, is that light is a metaphor for consciousness. So light is a metaphor for consciousness. So I believe that Brahman, or created the universe so that consciousness, because just to put it very simply, I think that when all the matter in the universe turns light or turns into consciousness, I think the experiment of this universe will come to an end, which would mean that the aspiration of Brahman would be fulfilled.
Okay.
So if we just imagine right now the entire universe, how much of this entire universe is conscious of itself?
Okay.
Because when human beings become enlightened, that means we are matter becoming self-aware or becoming self-conscious. So if we look at the universe right now, there's a very small, minute portion of the totality of the cosmos that's self-aware. So then we have to imagine from this minute and almost immeasurable portion of the whole cosmos being conscious. Imagine the whole universe becoming conscious or self-aware, the whole universe turning to light. All matter in the universe turning to light or becoming self-aware. That's when I think the whole process would be fulfilled.
Okay. That's an interesting point of view, sir. Thank you so much. And we have another question regarding patterns, sir. We say history repeats itself. So this has been happening in the history of human beings and also at an individual level for a personal experience of a person. So we have seen like it happens within a few days, or even we can see the patterns happening. Like say we can even imagine ourselves like I was in such a situation 20 years ago. So it is like, what is it I have to learn from this experience, which I did not learn that time? So how do we incorporate, or how do we become aware of ourselves from those situations?
I don't think I completely understand the question. I'm sorry.
Okay, so we say that history repeats itself, right, sir? We have been seeing in the past and the present also, and a person is alive for 50 years. A person might have been in a similar situation 20 years ago, and it is happening. The same people, I mean, with the names or something, similar situation, a financial crisis or something, the person is there again after 20 years. So how do we learn, which we did not learn that 20 years ago? Like, how do we come out of those kind of patterns?
Well, there's two possibilities that could help us to change in this way. One would be that we have to wake up. And wake up, in other words, sometimes in Zen, the Zen master smacks the student in the face, says, wake up! So what is it going to take to wake us up from our unconscious patterns? And this is for any one of us. We have to ask ourselves, what will it take for any one of us to wake up from our unconscious patterns? And sometimes it's enormous suffering. Sometimes it's the loss of a loved one, or maybe the terrible event of getting a disease, or some shock to the system sometimes wakes us up. And we say, no, I have to change. I have to change. I have to make the effort to change. And so the question is everybody's different. Everybody's different. So the question we have to ask ourselves personally is, what is it going to take for me to wake up? What is it going to take for me to want to change? For me to stop resisting change? Because most people would prefer to stay asleep than they would to wake up. There's a great resistance to wanting to wake up. There's a great resistance to being conscious. There's a great resistance to consciousness, because the more conscious we become, the more responsible we have to be willing to be. And most people don't want to be responsible. They want to live in the dream. They want to live in the dream of independent self-existence. So the answer to the question is, what will it take to wake any one of us up? How much do we have to suffer? What terrible events have to happen to get us to that point where we really want to wake up and we really want to live, to know what the truth is? We really want to know what the truth is. So we will continue to make the same mistakes if we refuse to learn from the past. We'll continue to make the same mistakes unless we're willing to learn from the past. But the willingness to learn requires great humility. Willingness to learn requires enormous humility, and most people are very arrogant and very overconfident and self-assured. And so sometimes life has to break us. So we come to our knees and we say, I'm going to stop. I'm going to change. I want to change. I'll do anything. Please, God, help me. We have to become desperate. I believe we have to become desperate.
So we have to request for help in that case and contemplate within ourselves, sir?
I think we have to be willing to, we have to come to our knees before the absolute. We have to become, the ego has to become humbled. The ego has to become drastically humbled. And when we become humbled, we realize and express a level of vulnerability, transparency, openness, that we normally would never show because we're too proud. Pride protects us. And so when this what mask or wall of pride is cracked open and we come to our knees in humility and vulnerability, we begin to show the most beautiful part of ourselves, a place that's free from pretense. And that's what I think God wants from all of us.
Thank you, sir. That was a revealing factor. Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you.
So we have Nirmala ji with us. So yes, Nirmala ma'am, please go ahead with your question.
Good evening, sir. Namaste, everybody.
Hello, madam.
So my question is about past karma. In this life, of course, we know our mistakes, whatever we have done, we are responsible for it. We can work on it through our meditation or whatever things we are learning from all the masters. And what about our past life? Should we go to past life regression and should we know about our past life to work on it? Or without knowing anything about our past life, can we work on it? Or in this life, we are working on our past life, I mean past karmas. But if there is no cooperation from the others on whom we are working, so what should be done? If we are negative responses continuously, what should be done, sir?
Well, if we're getting negative responses continuously, it means we're doing something wrong. So, but we need help. We all need help.
Yes, sir.
We all need help on the way. So what we have to do is seek out the guidance of a mentor that we find trustworthy, that we believe, that we're convinced has reached a higher level of consciousness than we have.
Yes.
So we need to seek out help from people that we trust or that appear to that convince us that they see more deeply than we do. Life communicates with us. Life has a way of reflecting to us difficult truths about ourselves. Sometimes life's some difficult truth. Yeah, life will. And as I was saying earlier when I was giving my talk, if we want to be free more than anything else, we will find the courage to face things that are very difficult.
Yes.
Because when we don't face things that are true about ourselves, as was happening in the last conversation, we're probably going to be repeating bad habits.
Yes.
So if we want to be free more than anything else, we'll find the courage within ourselves to face things that are difficult, to face things that are painful, to face things that are true, and that will open up the possibility of real evolution at the level of our own soul.
Yes, sir.
And in terms of your question about the past lives, I'm very interested, for example, in my past lives, but I've never been able to have any insight into what my past lives were. So I've always wanted to know about my past lives, but I've never had the opportunity to find out. And yet I'm also convinced that the karma of our past lives are available to us in the present moment, because that karma is what's helped to create the conditions that we find ourselves in this life. So from a certain point of view, we don't really need to look into the past to find out what the truth about our past lives is, because the consequences of all of that is right here with us in the present moment. So if we can sort ourselves out and straighten ourselves out in the present moment, we can also free ourselves from the past.
Yes, sir.
And make ourselves ready to live in the future. But the question is, and it always boils down to, am I willing to let go unconditionally?
Yes.
So as I was saying a few minutes ago, someone said, what does it mean to be free? The question was, and I said, being free is jumping out of an airplane without a parachute. So the metaphor for jumping out of an airplane without a parachute means I'm ready to let go and I have no intention of coming back. Coming back means to the way things were. I have no intention of coming back to the way things were. I intend to go all the way to the other side.
Yes.
So
Without expecting anything. Without expecting the result to see immediately. Do you mean to say?
Well, no, if we jump out of an airplane without a parachute, I think we have great expectations. Nobody would jump out of an airplane without any expectations unless they were crazy. Only someone would have the courage to jump out of an airplane without a parachute if they had expectations of moksha.
Yes, sir.
It's like when the Buddha sat down under the Bodhi tree, I will not get up until I'm enlightened. This was a great expectation. He didn't sit down and say, I'm going to sit here all night and whatever happens is fine with me. So no, I won't get up until I'm enlightened. So I think in relationship to spiritual development, it's perfectly fine to have big expectations as long as we're willing to live up to those expectations. So in this context, the answer is, am I willing to let go? It always boils down to a willingness to let go unconditionally without any excuses. Am I willing to let go? Am I ready to let go unconditionally? Because that's the secret to moksha, is the willingness to let go without conditions. And it's that simple, but it's that absolute. So in the depths of our meditation, we need to look into the question, am I ready to let go unconditionally? Am I ready to let go unconditionally? When the answer is yes, the door will open.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Anandaji, you can just...
Yes. Yes, sir. We have a query. You were saying, I mean, we all, in the path of meditation, we know that we are whole and we are the universe inside us. And whatever we see outside is just a reflection of whatever is happening within us. And we also have this law of attraction. So why do we attract the pain and sufferings if we are in the state of happiness or joy in life, sir?
Well, if in fact we attract pain and suffering, if that's true, because not everybody attracts pain and suffering. But if we find that we're attracting pain and suffering, it means that there's parts of ourself and our own consciousness and our own karma that we're not facing, that we're not coming to terms with. Because if we're attracting negativity to us without intending to do so, and we're doing that repeatedly, it must mean that we're doing something that we're not consciously aware of. This is called shadow. And if we're acting out of shadow, it means we're acting in ways that we're not consciously aware of. And when we act in ways that we're not consciously aware of, that has karmic consequences. And when those karmic consequences come back to affect us, we're seeing the effect of our own shadow, of our own parts of our own mind and parts of our own emotions, parts of our own unresolved karma that we haven't seen and that we have yet to take responsibility for. Because when we take responsibility for all of ourselves, when we take responsibility for all of our own karmas, that's not going to happen anymore. Because our consciousness and our awareness has gotten too strong. And it means we're no longer acting out of unconscious impulses.
Okay. Okay, sir. So in that case, we become aware of what is happening to us. So what are the questions or any guidelines for us, like how to become aware and what next to ask ourselves?
Well, as I've spoken about quite a bit on this time we spent together, to me the most important question is, do I want to be free? Number one.
Really free.
Number one is, do I want to be free? And the second question is even more complicated, is, do I want to be free more than anything else? Those are the two most important questions, because if we want to find out where we're at in relationship to moksha, we should ask ourselves very seriously, when there's no one else in the room and there's no one else to impress or to disappoint, it's just between us and God, do I want to be free? Everybody says yes.
Yes.
And we say,
I mean, what next, sir, after that?
Well, the question is, if we say, do I want to be free more than anything else? And we say, yes, I want to be free more than anything else. Then we proceed to jump out of the airplane without the parachute. So you say, well, what does it mean? It means different things to different people. But remember, with the woman I was speaking to a few minutes ago, the path to moksha is always the path of letting go. I'm reducing it to its most simple, basic component, because a lot of people make this very complicated. It's always about letting go. Letting go of wrong ideas, letting go of ego, letting go of karma, letting go of so many attachments. But the path to freedom, the path to inner freedom, is always realized through letting go unconditionally. Not my will, but thy will be done. Not my will, but thy will be done. Not my will, but thy will be done. And I'm letting go of my small self, and I'm letting go of my small self, and I'm letting go of my mind, and I'm letting go of my mind, I'm letting go of my fears, letting go of my fears, letting go of all my negativity, all my doubts, everything that's negative inside me, I'm letting go of all of it, and I'm trusting only in God.
In your session, you were also talking about taking responsibility for a future karma, sir. So when we don't even know what it is going to be, how do we take responsibility for that?
By intending to take responsibility for the future karmas. All we can do now is intend. I intend with all of my heart to take responsibility for all of the karmas that have yet to be created in the future. This is when our soul is reaching into the future. It's reaching beyond the present moment. into the unknown future. My soul is reaching through the present moment into the unknown future, and it's almost like we're reaching way beyond ourselves into what we can't see, with the noble superheroic intention to take responsibility for it. So can we actually take responsibility for what hasn't happened yet? No. But can we intend to take responsibility for what hasn't happened yet? Yes. Will intending to take responsibility for what hasn't happened yet make us a better person? There's no doubt.
Yes, sir. That makes it clear.
Yes, Anantamani, you can just reserve the final question.
Yes, sir. So we are taking responsibility for our past karma and our future karmas also, sir. So we have a positive and a negative for everything. So we are very happy to welcome the joy into our lives, but we are not really happy to welcome the pain and suffering. But we have to act equally to be in balance. So how do we do it, sir?
How do we balance pain and suffering?
Yes, sir.
Well, I think that we don't want to welcome pain and suffering, because I don't think that pain and suffering is what we're living for. But we need to learn how to nobly face the pain and suffering, that if there is pain and suffering that we need to experience, it's unavoidable. If it's unavoidable, then we have to learn how to embrace that pain and suffering with dignity, and with nobility, and with courage. With courage. And it's the most impressive thing if you see a human being that is suffering, maybe because of an accident or because of a disease, but they're able to bear that suffering with dignity and with a very big heart. It's so inspiring. To me, it's one of the most inspiring things when we can see that kind of spiritual heroism. So I don't think pain and suffering is something we want to look for or want to embrace, because I don't think that's why we weren't born to suffer. But suffering is part of life, and we all have to learn how to, if we need to suffer, then we need to learn how to suffer gracefully, with dignity and with courage.
Okay, that makes it very clear, sir. Thank you.
Very good.
Yes.
Andrew, we are very, 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 very thankful you being here on this Weekend Wisdom platform of Pyramid Valley International.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure. I really appreciate this, and the sincerity of the questions and the quality of the listening has been really wonderful.
Hi, Andrew. This is Chandu here.
Hey, Chandu. Namaste. How are you? Nice to see you.
Yeah, doing great. Yes, very, very happy to see you, and had wonderful session.
Thank you so much. The pleasure is all mine.
Yeah. So once again, thank you very much for coming to Pyramid Valley sessions.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me. It's been wonderful.
Thank you, Andrew. Yeah.
Love to everybody.
Yes. Thank you.
And to Patriji, of course.
So thank you, Alco too, because she has been a great helping partner for you, who has been a great support, and who has been coordinating from the beginning till now, even for the technical aspects. So thank you, Alka. I feel that you've been hearing it. And thank you, Andrew. It was a great, great, great pleasure having you here.
Thank
you.
you.
Charlie, we look forward to you for many more sessions in Pyramid Valley.
Thank you, and love to all of you. Thank you so much, and love to Patriji.
Yes. We'll convey our regards to him.
Thank you so much.